Ki-Adi-Mundi has a new birthday!
Yay!
But everyone's mad about it. What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Star Wars Explained Weekly Q&A. I'm Alex.
I'm Molly.
And we are going to be talking about Ki-Adi-Mundi. We've already addressed this in our live stream, but I know not everyone watches our after shows, so we're going to discuss it a little bit more. Before we do that, there are a couple of news stories that I wanted to bring up. I'm excited to hear, first of all, that Young Jedi Adventures is getting a second season. That was announced over this past week.
Hand me my nubs.
Bring me my nubs. Little Nubs is coming back. He's growing up a little bit. They have mission robes now. They said it's going to take place after Light of the Jedi, so...
No missions.
They're going on missions, maybe.
No danger.
I mean, I don't know. I think they're going to be fine. I think this is interesting that it takes place after Light of the Jedi, because it's a time where some serious stuff has happened, but the Nihil are thought to be largely defeated right after that book. So I don't think they're going to be in any real intense danger. I bet they're going to go to, not the Republic Fair, but before it, I hope they visit Valo, because then they get to go to the zoo.
Yeah.
They can see preparations for Valo, but I really hope they get away from Valo.
Yeah, they're not going to be there for that event.
Yeah, I hope they are not there for the Nihil attack on the Republic Fair.
Do you think that they'll run into the Drengir?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because they're scary, yes, and they eat meat
People.
and people, but they could dumb that down a little bit for a show like that and make some scary.
They could make it a little
plant
silly.
monsters.
I could see that, because Nubs has an affinity for plant life, and Liss has a love for animal life, so that kind of combines their interests.
Mm-hmm.
I think Drengir is a possibility. Anything that's been in the High Republic, I say, is on the table. But ultimately, I enjoyed that show way more than I thought I would. You know, it's one of those things that obviously it's not made for us, but, you know, we went into it thinking we'll watch an episode or two, and I want to cover it for the channel and just keep up with things, but it never once felt like a chore. It was always some new Young Jedi Adventures just dropped, and we would sit and eat dinner and watch them. And I really do like those characters.
Yeah, it just kind of became part of our routine, but especially with a character like Nubs, you know, that was an immediate fan favorite for a lot of people. But the other characters are really cute and interesting too. And yeah, you mentioned Liz and her affinity for animals. There's a lot of cute...
You love those cute animals. There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of cute animals in that show, which will always catch my attention. And I don't care if it's made for babies. I'll watch it.
Genuinely, the stuff with Belle and Kai, I'm looking forward to more of that. Oh, just realized, though, that Belle won't have Loden around. So maybe they don't bring Belle into the story at that point, because he could be real sad. But that also could be a teaching moment for young kids to be how do we deal with sadness?
Maybe Belle is in therapy.
Maybe he is. I hope so. If he just goes to take a breather on Tanu, that could be nice.
Yeah.
The other little news story I wanted to mention is that it was officially announced that the current ongoing Star Wars comic runs are coming to an end at issue 50. People kind of suspected that for a while. I know this isn't a huge deal for you because you don't keep up with a lot of the comics. You are making your way through the High Republic Phase 1 right now. But...
Yes, and I'm really enjoying those. I just got to the Drengir.
Nice. So I'm actually very happy to hear that we're going to be bringing those stories to a conclusion. And later this year, it said that Marvel's going to announce the comics moving into a new era. Don't know if that means post Return of the Jedi, in between episodes 1 and 2, something completely different. But I'm definitely ready for a reset. It's been 5 years with this run. And I'm I think I'm ready to shift gears a little bit.
Honestly, if they go into some sequel trilogy stuff, I might just hop on board for that.
That would be interesting. It's I think they've been staying away from that because of the new Jedi Order movie on the way, and they, I assume, don't want the comics to be bumping into things they might cover in that film. But you never know. It could jump way into that.
We could see, Finn's time for a little bit on Starkiller Base and like see his escape from there a bit more fleshed out. Would be kind of cool.
Pre-sequel stuff. Yeah, I could see pre-sequel stuff. And now that you mention it, I think issue 50 of Star Wars is going to involve Ben Solo. Like, it'll be Luke telling Ben some stories that complete Charles Soule's run of the main Star Wars line. And that's the second time he's done this. He also did that with Leia, where Luke and Leia were doing their training together and also going through the story of Kira. So maybe there's a chance that we move into post Return of the Jedi and it's about Luke and Leia training, Luke and Ben training. I'm not sure, but whatever it is, I'm ready for something new. Now let's talk about something old.
Something even older than we could have imagined.
Something and someone old. Yeah, we thought he was a normal, like, human age, but it turns out he's got like an extra 100 years under his belt. Ki-Adi-Mundi.
Under his head.
Under his big ol' head. So yeah, Ki-Adi-Mundi has caused like so many waves in the fandom this past half week.
Strangely. It's a very strange thing.
Yeah. We've talked about how before we do a live stream or like, whenever we see a new episode of anything Star Wars, we kind of try to guess, like, what do you think people are going to make a big deal out of that doesn't deserve it? And never in a million years would I have guessed Ki-Adi-Mundi would be the centerpiece of all that.
No.
So, like, we watched the episode, we went, oh, is that Ki-Adi-Mundi? Then he opened his mouth, and Molly was like, that's definitely Ki-Adi-Mundi.
What did he say? He said something was absurd, and I was like, that's him.
An apprentice who doesn't know their master? That's absurd.
Yeah, that I just was like, yes, I know that man.
Big Mundi energy in that line. So,
oh boy.
I did go, like, oh, I didn't think he was that old. And I looked it up, and I was like, no canon birthday. Serenes don't have a canon lifespan. I was like, oh, that was all Legends. Yes, they made him older than he was in Legends. And I went, okay, and kept on going. And in fact, we were both excited that Ki-Adi-Mundi was involved in the story because this whole time, ever since a Sith was shown in the trailer, people went like, but Ki-Adi-Mundi said the Sith have been extinct for a millennium. And like, how do we reconcile that? And I'm like, the point of that character and that line is that he's wrong.
Yeah. He's very wrong. There are two Sith right under their noses.
He's confidently wrong all the time. The Sith are extinct. Darth Maul and Palpatine are right there. There's no way Dooku could do that. Dooku is a political idealist, not a murderer. That's his line in Attack of the Clones. Like, he is there to represent the Jedi being too sure of themselves, which is something Yoda says is a problem with the prequel era Jedi. So that's kind of the setup. When we saw Ki-Adi-Mundi, I was like, oh, this means that they're going to dive into that. That they are fully aware of Ki-Adi-Mundi's line. Not that I thought they weren't, but they're going to deal with it head on by having Ki-Adi-Mundi here.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense for him to be there when you think about it. But I did enjoy that it was a kind of cameo, but not really. Like, they didn't even call him by name, not even in the subtitles. He was just there.
In the credits, yeah.
And you had to wait and see his name in the credits to know for sure that was him. And I was like, I appreciate that they did that, and they weren't like, Ki-Adi-Mundi, what do you think?
Right. Well, so many people have been saying, like, I can't believe they would just ruin The Phantom Menace with this pointless cameo. And still, people are so stuck on that line of Ki-Adi-Mundi saying, the Sith have been extinct for a millennium. And, like, that's what he says, but again, that the point is that he is wrong. And I don't understand how people can't wrap their heads around that.
George Lucas did not have him say that line so that everyone would be like, you know what, he's right.
Yeah.
We should all believe that line.
It's Qui-Gon Jinn going, I think that was a Sith. And all the other Jedi being like, nuh-uh, it can't be. We dealt with that.
Yeah, it's the point of that scene is that Qui-Gon is trying to get some information to them, and they're not listening to him.
They don't want to listen. And the Jedi were thought to be extinct, but the rule of two has kept them alive for 1,000 years, and the Jedi didn't know it. So that's the point of Ki-Adi-Mundi. And I guess it's the same thing as, people still seem to think that in The Last Jedi, the true version of what happened in Ben's hut is Luke with, evil eyes getting ready to kill his nephew. When, that's not what happened. It's what Ben thinks happened.
Mm-hmm.
But people really struggle with subjectivity in Star Wars, I guess.
Yeah, because we see two different versions in that. We see Ben's version and we see Luke's version, and they're very different. And
Luke's first version is a lie.
Yeah.
And then Ben's is a truth from a certain point of view.
An exaggerated truth.
Right. And then Luke's is the sad truth.
Yeah.
Of, his lightsaber was on, but he had tears in his eyes.
That doesn't happen very often in Star Wars. We don't often see an event from different points of view and see it different in different lights. So that's a lot of what this show is about, and I think people are struggling with it a little bit.
Yeah, and that's fine. It brings up conversation and stuff, but we have people who will just jump to conclusions and say that if Ki-Adi-Mundi is there, it makes him a liar, which it might. We'll get to that. But people seem to think that he knows a Sith exists at this point in time. But the scene he is in, they are looking at a hologram of May, and they're like, well, she's a Force user, and a Force user trained her. Rogue Jedi, Splinter Order, no one says the word Sith because they're all also in denial. They don't want to believe, oh, are our worst enemies still around?
Yeah.
So the word Sith is not mentioned in that scene. Ki-Adi-Mundi doesn't go on the mission to see the Sith.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how this is all going to resolve at the end of the season. And I can't say whether or not I'm going to like that they included him or not. Right now, I'm like, okay, I think this means that they are going to fully confront that line in The Phantom Menace head on. Maybe they don't. Maybe I will, at the end of the day, go, I don't like that Ki-Adi-Mundi was in this. But to jump to conclusions based off of absolutely nothing is wild to me.
I hope Ki-Adi-Mundi has an insane monologue in this show, just explaining his full feelings on everything.
Give him a chance to say something meaningful that isn't just wrong. But it's like a beautiful monologue, but it is still fully wrong.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to think about him being around for this long because you're right. We don't know the rest of the story. We don't know if Ki-Adi-Mundi finds out more information or not. But now that we know he's been around for this long and ends up on the High Council, it's more interesting, I think, now to see what he says in The Phantom Menace about the Sith have been extinct for a millennium. Is he in just deep denial at that point in his life? Because, sometimes as people get older, their willingness to change and adapt goes away.
Right.
And that could be what we're seeing for Ki-Adi-Mundi.
Well, let's get into that because I meant to at the top mention that Spider-Man of Earth 1218 asks, what if Ki-Adi-Mundi does know about the Sith in episode 1 but is just playing dumb? So there are a couple of options here that we can speculate on. I think what's most likely is that Ki-Adi-Mundi will never learn that this group of Jedi encountered a Sith. Maybe they all die. Maybe the people on that mission cover it up to him.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to come back and be like, nah, it was something else. And with a 1,000-yard stare, I think they will lie to him. And then he will go on believing the Sith have been extinct. I think that in The Phantom Menace, he fully believes himself when he's saying that. But it is possible that they learn of the Sith and he is part of the cover-up. Because I do think there will be a cover-up in this story.
Yeah.
So maybe he is part of that. It could be.
Maybe if a Sith is only around for a little bit, not around long enough for everybody to find out, but even if this just small group of Jedi find out and nip it in the bud, as far as they know, I could see them just being like, yeah, the Sith have been extinct for that doesn't count.
Right.
It was a quick little thing, and
we saw
no
one
big deal.
person with a red lightsaber. We killed them, and they still might not know that it is a Sith.
Yeah.
That person might never say those words, and they'll be like, ooh, we saw someone with a red lightsaber. Are we even going to entertain the idea that it's a Sith?
That's a good point.
Nah.
That's a good point, because I could see the Jedi not wanting to fully admit to themselves, to each other, that they are dealing with a full-on Sith. If it's a Jedi that's lost their way, that sounds a little easier to say to each other, a little easier to swallow, but I don't know. We still don't know so much about what's going on.
Right. And that's kind of what's bugging me, is that without even spending a lot of time, I can think of a bunch of different directions this story could go, ways that it could add more depth to that line from The Phantom Menace, that we will rewatch that movie and be like, oh, like, there's more going on here. But instead, people want to just shut it down. They have no creativity, no imagination. They just want to be like, this isn't what George would do. Especially, like, if you want to talk about retcons and legends and stuff, boy, like, I made the joke on our live stream that I felt like Elrond, because I was like, I was there in 2002 when a bunch of my legend stories and facts that I knew were just like washed away watching Attack of the Clones. I didn't get mad about it, but I was like, oh, that's not Boba Fett's backstory from Tales of the Bounty Hunters. Oh well.
I guess I learned something new and can adapt to that.
Owen Lars went from he's definitely Anakin's brother to no, the Return of the Jedi novelization made him Obi-Wan Kenobi's brother. And then Attack of the Clones came along and was like, actually, he's Anakin's half-brother by birth. So, like, I don't know. George was always willing to change things, go with the flow. Dave Filoni learned from him. And even there's a bunch of fun clips going around of Dave kind of challenging George when George wanted to change something. And Dave would be like, well, didn't we kill that character? Like, didn't we kill Eth Koth in Attack of the Clones? And the reference books say so. And George went, nah. Like, I want to use him again.
I want Darth Maul in Clone Wars while we cut him in half.
Right. If he thought that it would tell a better story, George was willing to retcon things. It ruffles my feathers too sometimes, but I guess it's happened so many times over the course of my life as a Star Wars fan that I'm able to brush it off. It is a case-by-case basis, like, depending on what connection I have to the source material. But this Ki-Adi-Mundi thing, to me, I only saw story possibilities and not anger and rage and blah, blah, blah.
I think this really comes down to just the people that were never going to like the show have, from week to week, pinpointed something specific that they are, going to be mad about vocally on the internet. And they're all going to rally together behind this one thing. We went into this episode thinking maybe it was going to be Kelnaka having an off-screen death. I was like, oh, for sure, people are going to be mad about that. And yeah, it's upsetting, but this being the thing that people latched onto was wild. So a lot of it, I think, is just people on the internet already looking to be mad at something. Some of them might not even remember who Ki-Adi-Mundi is or care about him at all as a character. They just saw what other people were mad about, and they were like, there it is.
Time to dogpile. And so some of it is that.
Yeah. And that's just going to continue to happen. So you got to kind of put things in perspective and just know that no matter what, there will be people online to make mountains out of molehills when it comes to like little details that they want to be mad at.
It is interesting to me that it happened in almost the first scene of the episode. We got a little Kilnaka thing, and then it went to Coruscant. And yeah, we thought it was going to be something at the end of the episode that we're like, oh, we didn't get to see the Wookiee fight, which I am still bummed about. But yeah, just the first thing we're like, okay, let's latch onto this. And then, we've talked about this before, but you can kind of tell when a bunch of people are latching onto something, and like you just see comments or tweets that are worded almost the same.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Amandela's video because you showed me that and I thought that was interesting too. But I do want to just say that, yeah, sometimes things happen, things change. Sometimes it upsets me, but you don't have to let it ruin your day because that's kind of a silly thing to do. You also definitely don't have to go online and yell at other people about it. People who might not even know the deal. Like, there's a lot of people who are just watching The Acolyte. They might remember Ki-Adi-Mundi. And they're like, wow, I liked that episode. And then someone comes into their mentions like, well, how dare you? What did you think of Ki-Adi-Mundi? He's been ruined.
Yeah.
Which I also think is a stretch to say, like, how Ki-Adi-Mundi ruined himself. Like,
what was there to ruin?
Right.
Okay.
He's Ki-Adi-Mundi.
Yeah. And I think that plays into the idea of like people wanting to prove how much they know about Star Wars. And when stuff like this happens and something like a Legends fact gets changed for canon, I think it can sometimes feel like a challenge to someone's intelligence or a challenge to the amount of trivia knowledge that they have. And
I will relate to this, yes.
I understand that is difficult. That something you used to know is different now, and you have to relearn something. But that should be just a part of your life, that you should be able to change and adapt to things like that, or you're just not going to enjoy this franchise long term.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing that hits me where I say, oh, I thought I knew this, or especially like with Legends and little details like an alien's lifespan. I will just assume that whatever they said in Legends is probably true until I'm told otherwise. And so, yeah, they hadn't said anything in canon, as far as I'm aware, about a Saurian's lifespan. And so I did kind of go like, wait a minute, wasn't he born later? And then I went, oh, okay, new information, moving on. But yeah, to talk about like things that people latch onto and the way that misinformation spreads, this also became relevant again because Amandela put out a video calling out the people who took an interview of hers on The Daily Show from 7 years ago and tried to make it about Star Wars. Like, someone clipped it down to her saying, the goal is to make white people cry. And someone said, this is her talking about The Acolyte. And it was an interview from 7 years ago.
What was it about?
It was, the full context
is
it's about a movie called The Hate You Give, which is about police violence towards the black community. Specifically a black boy. I haven't seen the movie, but the point of her quote saying the goal was for white people to cry, it was, the goal is to make white people feel empathy for this situation.
Yeah.
The goal is to make white people feel for us as a people.
Yeah.
Like, and not cry in a guilty way, but cry because this is a sad story.
Yeah. Cry because they care about what happened to this boy.
Yes. That's it. That's all she was trying to say, is the goal was to help people like look at something that is difficult to acknowledge and realize that there is empathy to be found with your fellow human being. But someone had to take that. This is like so gross to me that someone took that message and then tried to be like, she's talking about Star Wars and she hates us.
Can you imagine taking a subject like that and trying to make it about Star Wars?
Well, like, I'm glad she called out everyone who did that.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the video, go watch it. It's really interesting. I mean, it's cool that she made it. within like 72 hours, I think. She like wrote the song, shot it herself, edited it on her computer. You know, she did all those things. And, you know, I wish more artists and more people working in this industry would speak out about this stuff, because it's hard that we have to deal with, you know, bad comments and stuff online and people saying horrendous stuff to us. But she is getting so much hate directed towards her, and she's an actor. You know, this is a part that she played in a fictional universe.
It's not even like when we get comments, it's usually not about us. There's nothing super hateful in the sense that I think Amandela would receive it. It's nothing about who Amandela is as a person. We get like, oh, shill, or occasionally we see some very horrendous stuff, but like it kind of just goes off of us because we know who we are and it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
But like for someone to just attack Amandela because of their race is like, that's what she's talking about.
Yeah. And she calls out specifically in the song, you know, journalists who are not taking responsibility for the kind of stuff that they're putting out. That is very true, and that happens all the time now. And just people not understanding that if you put out content on the internet and you have any kind of fan base, any amount of fan base, I think you have a level of a responsibility to, you know, first of all, not weaponize your community. Second of all, just like don't spread hatred that's going to fester in other people, in these like very impressionable young people online.
Well said. I'll do the old Force Center well said. I agree. Like, I don't consider us journalists. We don't have journalism degrees or English degrees or any degrees, but
we've just been around. You know what's interesting? Millennials, I think, have an interesting perspective on being on the internet in general, because we were there when it started for the first time, and like we've seen it kind of grow and evolve, and we've seen what the younger generation, how like dependent the younger generations are on just the internet. And I don't know, it's interesting to think about how much it's evolved, and what people like us as YouTubers or whatever you want to call us, what we have a responsibility to do.
The point is, no matter your audience size, you have a responsibility for it. Yeah. And we take that responsibility seriously.
Yeah, I don't care what my dentist says. This is a real job, and I take it very seriously.
We want to create a community that is welcoming, feels safe, no matter if you like the Acolyte, hate the Acolyte, love what they did with Ki-Adi-Mundi, hate it. It's not about that. It's just about treating each other with respect, treating everyone else in the Star Wars fandom with respect.
Long story short, learn to adapt. Be nice to people. Treat them with respect. Treat them how you would want to be treated. What else?
Honestly, I mean, just listen to George Lucas, really. If you want to talk about, well, George wouldn't have done this, it's like, okay, but ultimately what Star Wars is about and what George said is that we need to treat each other well. Like, just look up George Lucas and his actual quotes. Read a book about the making of Star Wars and why he wanted to make Star Wars. It wasn't about all this trivia. He wanted to tell a story about helping one another and being cool to one another and not being fearful and angry and hateful to one another. I think he actually said that's all the dark side. So go listen to George. Okay, well, we talked about that for plenty of time. Before we close out the Ki-Adi-Mundi talk, I just want to bring up that our friend Sean Sullivan from Scoundrels Inc. podcast literally just texted me a clip from their podcast that they did yesterday, and they also wished Ki-Adi-Mundi a happy birthday. And he got a birthday cake of plain white bread with a candle in it, which is real give me the plain ice flavor of snow cone energy from the book The Living Force.
Ki-Adi-Mundi is definitely cutting the crust off of his plain white bread.
He's going to do that too. 1 in 5 Americans have learn a new language on their bucket list. If that's you, make 2024 the year you finally check it off the list with Babel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babel's convenient courses teach you real-life conversation skills in different languages, so it's easy to learn how to order food, ask for directions, and more without having to consult an app while on vacation. Babel has over 16 million subscriptions sold, plus all of Babel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/Star Wars. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/Star Wars, spelled BABBEL.com/Star Wars. Rules and restrictions may apply. But we have 2 questions we want to answer here. For old time's sake, we talked for way longer about that than I meant to. But Nisan Nadimi asks, why do so many Sith have masks?
They're just trying to be cool.
Trying to be cool. They're all trying to one-up each other. It is interesting that I think it is more of a... It probably comes and goes in style, honestly, because like Palpatine, no mask. Darth Maul, Dooku, no masks, because... they're getting to this point where we're ready to be out in public. The final Sith plan is taking shape. But when you go to the time of the High Republic and when everyone thought the Sith were extinct for 1,000 years, they needed to hide their identity. So let's all get a cool mask.
Yeah. I think this goes into some just like human psychology. I don't have a psychology degree, so I'm not going to go there. I do think there's a cool factor involved. The anonymity of it is important, obviously, to the Sith.
I do think, like, Sith just have a reputation, weirdly. That there are a lot of Sith masks. And even the Aftermath books talk about how a lot of Sith wore masks and even, like, put power into them. But, you know, we got Vader, who had to wear a mask. Malgus had to wear a mask. He didn't wear one until he got injured and needed a respirator. I'm not the biggest Old Republic lore nerd, so I might be wrong about that, but I believe he gets injured and then needs a thing. Revan's mask was more about gameplay, I think, because of the big twist of that game. Malik got his jaw cut off, so he needed a little face plate.
Yikes, who did that?
Revan.
Oh, no.
A lot of masks for the Sith seem to come out of necessity. There's a Sith in the comics who no mask at all. But then you have whoever is in the Acolyte, I think is trying to protect their identity and also is like, I'm going to zhuzh it up a little bit, put some cracks and stuff.
Well, you have Lord Momin, who is a mask.
You have Lord Momin.
He is a mask.
Yeah, he had a mask and then he became a mask. That's a good point.
That's all that's left.
Momin is 100% mask. Okay, so yeah, that balances things out a bit. His master, Lady Shaw, had a mask. So it does seem to be like kind of a 50-50 thing. But I think that I do like my idea that it's just a style thing that comes and goes. There's probably the Sith who wear masks and they're kind of like looking down on the Sith who don't. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, you think you're better than me?
Yeah. I wonder too, though, I'm sure there's something about this, but with TV and movie ratings, if you're going to have a character like Vader mowing down people with a laser sword, I think for Star Wars, there is an importance of not having a human face to that character. If you cover it with a mask, you know, it's a free-for-all.
I think there is something to that, even though we know that there's a human under there.
Same with stormtroopers. This happens a lot in, like, I think TV shows, especially with Clone Wars and animation. You know, in Clone Wars, the Jedi were mowing down droids. They weren't really wearing masks, but it was like anything with a human face, you couldn't really show the Jedi just mowing them down like that.
Right. Even like the Umbarans, when the clones fought Umbarans, they were masked up. The clones would put their helmets on. There is an element of that. I think Star Wars has always kind of gotten around. They're pretty violent, but yeah, for a younger kid, it doesn't seem quite as bad. You know, there's not that much blood. It's not quite human on human violence, even though we know that it is. The
boogeyman has to look like Darth Vader's mask. It can't look like some kid's uncle, right?
Yeah. GSW Rainmaker asks, are we worried that the High Republic has too many plot threads and characters to wrap up in Phase 3? A little bit, honestly. We won't get into Temptation of the Force spoilers. Having read it, I am like, there is one more adult novel left to wrap all this up, and I'm like, I trust them because they said that they had mapped this thing out from the start, so I think they know what they're doing, but I'm like, there's a whole lot that needs to happen, and yeah, there are a whole lot of characters, but really it's just giving me that feeling of watching a lot of Star Wars TV shows, or just shows in general, where you get to that second to last episode and you're like, how are they going to wrap all this up?
Mm-hmm.
Or like in The Mandalorian, Grogu gets captured in season 2, and then you're like, hold on, we're going to take a detour to go get Bill Burr back, and then it turns out to be an awesome episode.
Right.
But like, I remember having that feeling of like, you can't go on a detour right now.
Yeah.
And then being like, oh, that speech was sick.
Yeah. I think just saying the phrase, will they be able to wrap everything up, is maybe setting some people up for their expectations not to be met. You know, I think there's a good chance that they're not going to wrap everyone's stories up fully.
Yeah, some people might continue on.
That there could be purpose behind that. You know, we could get spin-off books, spin-off comics. You know, I think a big thing that Star Wars has started doing, it so that it doesn't end up a retcon later on down the road, is leaving a lot of open-ended stories, which isn't our favorite thing in the world, but you know, the potential of having more story to add to that character down the line, I think, is worth it.
Right. Someone like Bur Yaga, I think, I hope all the characters have satisfying arcs for this era, but yeah, Bur Yaga could always come back hundreds of years later.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we haven't seen him in the prequels, but that doesn't mean he wasn't walking around somewhere.
He's
and
on
then
Kofar.
He definitely survived Order 66 and is living his best life somewhere.
He's retired. He's not a Jedi anymore.
Yeah, we'll have to see how this ends, but they have said from the start they plotted the whole thing out. So yes, I do think that there are a lot of characters and a lot of storylines to wrap up. There is only one more adult novel, but I believe we have 2 more young adults, 2 more middle grades. I think the comic is about to wrap up, which will bring closure to Keeve Trennis's story. We've still got the High Republic adventures. There are 1 or 2 manga issues coming out. So there's still like quite a bit of storytelling left on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, if I've just read the adult novels, I think I would feel less like, oh, there's so much to do.
Like me.
Right.
I've read more than just the adult novels, but I have skipped around a lot, and it does make me question, are we going to get a satisfying end to all of these great characters? But for me personally, you know, like, I've got a little bit smaller of a group to really worry about.
Right. It's just the way, I'm not spoiling anything, because it's only been out a week and a half or so. But the way Temptation of the Force ended, I was like, what are you doing? You're doing this now?
Oh, no.
There's something...
I'm only like 20% into that book.
I was just like, what? Again, it just seems like there's a whole lot going on.
Uh-oh.
Hurry up so we can talk about it.
Oh.
But that is all the time we have for questions today. If you want to leave a question for next week's video, just put it in the comments below or sign up for Patreon to join our weekly Q&A discussion. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky.
And as always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.